Sarah Catherine Mercer's hands trembled as she stood frozen in the middle of that dance floor. 300 pairs of eyes burned into her back. The laughter of the women who'd sent her here echoed in her ears like breaking glass. She'd walked up to a stranger and asked him to dance. A man no one dared approach. A man who hadn't spoken to a single soul all evening. And he'd just said yes. She didn't know his name. Didn't know he owned half of Virginia. Didn't know that one dance would change everything. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The summer ball at Whitfield Manor was the kind of event Sarah Catherine Mercer had dreamed about back in Massachusetts. Chandeliers dripping with candles, silk rustling against polished floors, the scent of magnolias drifting through open windows. She should have known dreams had teeth. Go on, then. Lavinia Thornton's voice was honey poured over broken glass. You said you wanted to prove yourself. Sarah's stomach twisted. 5 minutes ago, this had seemed like a harmless game, a dare they'd called it, a tradition for newcomers to Virginia society. Ask a gentleman to dance, any gentleman of their choosing. Well, Lavinia tilted her head, blonde curls bouncing with practiced innocence. You ain't scared, are you? Course she ain't. Clara Whitfield giggled behind her fan. She's from Massachusetts. They're made of sterner stuff up there. Isn't that right, Miss Mercer? Sarah forced her spine straight. I'm not afraid. Then prove it. Lavinia's smile sharpened. That gentleman there, by the terrace doors. Ask him. Sarah followed her gaze and felt something cold settle in her chest. The man stood alone, completely deliberately alone. While the ballroom swirled with conversation and laughter, he occupied a pocket of silence so absolute it seemed deliberate. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed in clothes that spoke of money but not vanity. His face could have been carved from the Blue Ridge Mountains themselves, all hard lines and shadow. He wasn't looking at the party. He was staring out at the darkness beyond the terrace like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Why him? Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. Oh, he's perfectly harmless. Clara's eyes glittered with barely contained amusement. Just terribly dull. Never dances. Never speaks. You'll do your duty and escape after one turn. Simple as pie. But the way they watched her. The way Lavinia's fingers gripped her champagne glass. This wasn't simple. This was a trap. Too late to run. Sarah had accepted the dare in front of a dozen witnesses. Backing down now would mark her as a coward for the rest of the season. Her Aunt Martha had brought her south for opportunity, not humiliation. Fine. She smoothed the pale blue fabric of her gown simple compared to the elaborate confections around her and started walking. Each step felt louder than the orchestra. She could feel the whispers following her like shadows. Conversations pausing. Fans lifting to hide smirking mouths. By the time she reached him, heat climbed her neck and burned in her cheeks. He didn't acknowledge her. Didn't turn. Didn't shift. Just stood there still as stone, watching something in the garden that she couldn't see. Excuse me. Her voice came out clear. Small mercy. I wonder if you might do me the honor of the next dance. Nothing. For one horrible moment she thought he hadn't heard her. Or worse, that he was ignoring her completely. Then slowly he turned. His eyes hit her like a physical force. Not the pale blue or fashionable green she'd expected from a Virginia gentleman. These were brown. Deep, warm brown. The kind of color that should have been comforting. But there was nothing comfortable about the way he looked at her, like he was cataloging every flaw, measuring her against some invisible standard. You're new. Not a question. Yes, sir. I arrived last month from Massachusetts. She forced herself to hold his gaze. My aunt is Martha Prescott. Perhaps you know her. I know of her. His attention shifted past her shoulder, scanning the room with deliberate slowness. When his eyes returned to her face, Something flickered there. Almost amusement. Almost. "And who precisely suggested you approach me?" The question landed like a bucket of cold water. He knew. Of course he knew. "I—" Sarah swallowed hard. Behind her, the giggling had grown louder. "It was a dare. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your evening of standing alone in corners." She blinked. "I was going to say solitude." "Were you?" His eyebrow lifted. "Just barely. That's more charitable than most folks manage." "I reckon charity's in short supply at these things." The words slipped out before she could stop them, too honest, too direct, too Massachusetts. But instead of offense, something shifted in his expression. The ice cracked just a fraction. "Don't apologize," he said. "You're the most interesting thing that's happened all evening." He held out his hand. Palm up, clear as any challenge she'd ever seen. "Though you should know what you're getting yourself into before you commit." "What I'm getting into?" "Dancing with me." His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. "I'm Callahan. Nathan James Callahan." The world tilted. Sarah's breath caught as understanding crashed over her like a summer storm. Not a boring wallflower. Not a safe target for a harmless dare. Nathan Callahan. The Callahan. Owner of the largest land holdings in Virginia. One of the wealthiest men in the entire South. Rumor said he had the governor's ear and half the state legislature in his pocket. And she'd just walked up and asked him to dance like he was some farmer at a county fair. Behind her, the giggles had died into shocked silence. She heard Lavinia's strangled gasp. Clara's champagne glass shattered somewhere in the distance. They'd set her up perfectly. Provincial fool makes spectacle of herself by propositioning the most powerful man in Virginia. "I should go." Sarah took a step backward. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Mr. Callahan, I never would have." His hand caught hers, not forceful, but unmistakable. "Too late, Miss Mercer." He drew her forward, his grip warm and steady against her trembling fingers. "You've made your request publicly. I've accepted. To refuse now would be far more scandalous than your innocent mistake." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Besides, I haven't danced in 3 months. Might be amusing to remind everyone I still can." Before she could protest, he was leading her toward the center of the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Conversations died into stunned silence. The orchestra, sensing the moment, struck up a waltz. Sarah couldn't remember how to breathe, let alone dance. "Relax." His murmur brushed her ear as he positioned them correctly, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers with unexpected gentleness. "You ain't actually being led to the gallows, despite appearances." "Feels like I am," she admitted. "Everyone's staring. They're always staring." He began to move, and muscle memory took over her feet, following his lead before her mind could catch up. "The trick is deciding whether you care. Don't you?" "Not anymore." They turned smoothly through the first pattern, and she realized with surprise that he was an excellent dancer, assured without showing off, giving her space to find her rhythm instead of dragging her through the steps. "Though I suspect you do," he continued. "Care, I mean. You're new enough to still want their approval." "Is that so terrible?" "Not terrible." His gaze flicked past her shoulder, and for a moment his expression hardened. "Just exhausting, and often disappointing." Sarah followed his line of sight. An older woman in deep crimson stood near the refreshment table watching them with an expression that could have curdled milk. Beside her, a beautiful blonde girl had frozen mid-laugh, her pretty face twisted into a mask of pure shock. "Who are they?" Sarah asked, before she could stop herself. "Margaret Thornton and her daughter Caroline." Something dark flickered in his tone. "They've been working very hard to spread rumors that Miss Thornton and I have an understanding. An understanding. That we're to be married." His jaw tightened. Tonight was supposed to be a demonstration of that inevitability. Understanding dawned like cold sunrise, And by dancing with me instead, you've publicly indicated that any rumors of engagement are premature at best. He executed a smooth turn that brought them closer for just a moment. So, you see, Miss Mercer, you've actually done me a favor, even if it was by accident. I don't feel like I've done anyone a favor. Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. I feel like I've stepped into something I don't understand. For the first time, his expression softened into something genuine, something almost human. Welcome to Virginia society. That feeling never entirely goes away. He paused, then added with unexpected gentleness. But if it helps, your crime was innocence, not malice. That's rarer than you might think. The waltz ended too quickly, too slowly, both at once. Callahan released her with perfect propriety, stepped back, bowed with the precision of a man who'd been trained to it since childhood. Thank you for the dance, Miss Mercer. His voice carried clearly across the hushed room. I hope you enjoy the rest of your season. Then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the center of that dance floor while 300 people pretended not to watch. Sarah made it back to her aunt's side through sheer force of will. Her legs felt like water. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Well, Aunt Martha's voice was dry as Virginia dust. I did say you should make an impression. I just expected it to take more than 1 month. Aunt Martha, I didn't know. I know you didn't. Her aunt steered her firmly toward the terrace doors away from the staring eyes. That's the only reason those Thornton women aren't already spreading poison about you. Ignorance is your only defense. What do you mean? I mean Nathan Callahan hasn't danced with anyone since his father died 2 years ago. Martha's grip tightened on her arm. I mean Margaret Thornton has been planning her daughter's engagement to him since before Caroline could walk. And I mean you just walked into the middle of a political war you can't even see. Sarah's stomach dropped. A war? Callahan owns half the county. The Thorntons own the other half. Their families have been circling each other for decades. Martha's eyes were sharp, assessing. Margaret's been telling everyone that Caroline and Nathan have an understanding, that the marriage is inevitable. Tonight was supposed to prove it. And instead he danced with you. Her aunt's expression was unreadable. A nobody from Massachusetts, in front of everyone who matters. It was just one dance. Nothing in this world is just anything, child. Martha pulled her through the terrace doors and into the cool night air. Especially not when the Thorntons are involved. Inside, Sarah could hear the party resuming. Laughter, music, the machinery of society grinding back into motion. But she could feel something else too. Eyes, still watching, still calculating. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Nathan Callahan was watching too. From a dark corner of that ballroom, he stood with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. His eyes tracked her progress through the crowd. The way she held her shoulders straight despite the whispers. The way she refused to crumble under the weight of all that judgment. Who is she? His mother's voice came from beside him. Eleanor Callahan had appeared without a sound, the way she always did. Sarah Catherine Mercer, Martha Prescott's niece. The girl from Massachusetts. The same. Eleanor studied him with the same brown eyes he'd inherited, the same quiet assessment. You're smiling, she observed. I'm not. You nearly are. That's more than I've seen in 2 years. She paused. What did she say to you? Nathan thought about it, about her honesty, her directness, the way she'd looked at him like he was just a man, not a commodity to be acquired. She said charity's in short supply at these things. That's all. That's enough. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. Margaret Thornton is going to destroy her. I know. And you're going to let it happen. Nathan finally turned to look at his mother. His expression had hardened back into stone, but something burned behind his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before tonight. "No," he said. "I'm not." The calling cards arrived before Sarah finished her breakfast. 7 of them. Cream-colored, heavy with names she'd only heard whispered in ballrooms. Aunt Martha sorted through them with the efficiency of a general reviewing battle plans. Lady Whitfield, Mrs. Harrison, the governor's wife herself. Martha tapped the cards against her palm. "All wanting to include you in upcoming events." Sarah pushed her eggs around her plate. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw 300 faces staring. Heard the whispers chasing her across that dance floor. "I thought I'd be ruined after last night." Ruined? Martha set down the cards. "Child, you danced with Nathan Callahan, a man who hasn't touched a woman's hand in public for 2 years. You ain't ruined. You're a curiosity. They're probably laughing at me." "Some are." Her aunt's honesty was brutal as always. "The ones who arranged your little dare, but many more are wondering what you said to make him nearly smile." "He didn't smile." "He nearly did. I was watching." Martha poured more tea. Half of Virginia noticed. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "What does that mean?" "It means you've become interesting." Her aunt's eyes were sharp. And in this world, interesting is currency. Dangerous currency, but currency nonetheless. Before Sarah could respond, their housekeeper entered with another card. "This just arrived by special messenger, ma'am. For Miss Mercer." The paper felt expensive. Too expensive. Sarah broke the seal and felt her heart stutter at the crest pressed into the wax. "What is it?" Martha demanded. "It's from..." Sarah's voice trailed off. "It's from Eleanor Callahan, Nathan's mother." "Read it." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was elegant, precise. "Miss Mercer, I am hosting a musical afternoon on Thursday next. Your aunt mentioned your skill at the pianoforte during Mrs. Harrison's card party last month. I would be honored if you would consent to perform. We dine at 2. Eleanor Callahan." Silence filled the room. "Well," Martha's voice was carefully neutral. "It seems your evening of catastrophe has become an opportunity. Or another trap. Perhaps." Her aunt studied her face. "The question is, do you want to find out which..." Sarah looked at the invitation, at the elegant script, at the door it might open, or the cliff it might push her from. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." The Callahan estate sprawled across the Virginia countryside like it had grown there naturally. Sarah's carriage rolled up the long drive and she forced herself to breathe. She'd chosen Beethoven for her performance, partly because she knew it well enough to lose herself in the music, partly because the melancholy suited her mood. "Miss Mercer." Eleanor Callahan descended the front steps before Sarah could even reach the door. "How lovely. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Sarah felt some tension ease from her shoulders. "Thank you for the invitation, ma'am. I'm honored." "The honor is mine." Eleanor's eyes the same warm brown as her son's assessed Sarah with interest rather than judgment. "Your aunt tells me you studied under Herr Zimmermann in Boston. I heard him perform once years ago. Extraordinary technique. He was a demanding teacher. The best ones are." Eleanor took her arm. "Come, the guests are already gathering." The drawing room was full when they entered. Sarah recognized several faces from the ball, including Lavinia Thornton, who had the grace to look uncomfortable when their eyes met. But there were older guests too. Music lovers, Sarah guessed, here for art rather than gossip. Nathan stood near the fireplace. He'd abandoned his formal evening wear for something simpler. Dark coat, cream waistcoat, cravat tied with more practicality than fashion. He looked younger somehow, less like the intimidating figure from the ball, and more like a man. He glanced up as if sensing her attention. For one moment their eyes met across the room. Something flickered in his expression, recognition perhaps, or something warmer before someone asked him a question and the connection broke. "Don't stare, dear." Eleanor's voice held quiet amusement. It makes the other ladies jealous. Sarah felt heat climb her cheeks. I wasn't. Of course you weren't. Eleanor squeezed her arm. Come meet some of my friends. They've been asking about your performance all week. The afternoon passed in a blur of introductions and musical discussion. This was nothing like the ball. No hidden barbs. No performance of belonging. These people cared about music the way Sarah did, as something that mattered beyond social advantage. When they sat for dinner, Sarah found herself placed between an elderly judge who wanted to discuss Bach and a young woman who bred horses in the valley. Across from her, Nathan carried on a debate about farming with unexpected passion. The old methods are wasteful, he was saying. If we rotate crops properly using nitrogen-fixing plants. You sound like my father. The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. The table went quiet. Nathan's attention snapped to her. Your father farms. We all do. Did. She felt suddenly self-conscious under his focus. I have 3 younger brothers. We all helped during harvest. My mother said idle hands were the devil's workshop and she wasn't about to raise useless ornaments. Someone down the table laughed, not unkindly, surprised. But Nathan's expression had shifted into something intent. Almost hungry. You actually understand land management, he said slowly. You're not just familiar with the theory. I understand that good soil and hard work matter more than titles. Sarah met his gaze directly. If that's what you mean. That's exactly what I mean. He set down his glass. And you still found time to become an accomplished musician. My father believed culture and capability weren't opposites. She smiled slightly. We worked the fields in daylight and played music by candlelight. Though my brothers complained I got the better end of the bargain since playing piano doesn't leave splinters. Your brothers sound wise. Was that warmth in his voice? Something almost like humor. I'm beginning to think Massachusetts produces remarkably practical people, he continued. We call it common sense. Sarah held his gaze. Virginia calls it provincial. Virginia, Nathan said quietly, often confuses complexity with sophistication. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then Eleanor rose to lead the ladies back to the drawing room, and the spell broke. The piano was magnificent, a Broadwood grand with ivory keys that felt like silk beneath Sarah's fingers. She'd chosen the Beethoven Sonata No. 14, and as she began to play, the room fell away. The first movement flowed through her like water, soft and inevitable. She felt the weight of attention, but it didn't matter. This was the one place where she'd never doubted herself, the one language she spoke fluently, no matter who was listening. When the final notes faded, silence held for a long moment. Then applause erupted. Extraordinary. Eleanor's voice carried genuine emotion. Miss Mercer, you have a rare gift. The rest of the evening blurred into warmth. People wanted to discuss her interpretation, ask about her training, request other pieces. Sarah played twice more Mozart, then Chopin, and each time she felt the same sense of rightness. This at least she could do well. It wasn't until guests began departing that she found herself alone with Nathan near the entrance hall. You didn't tell me you were that good, he said without preamble. You didn't ask, you just sent an invitation. Fair point. He studied her with that same assessing look she remembered from the ball. Why Massachusetts Zimmerman could have secured you a position in Boston, Philadelphia, New York. You could have performed professionally. My family was in Massachusetts. She met his gaze steadily. That mattered more than a career impressing strangers. Even if it meant giving up something you clearly love. I didn't give it up. I just chose how to keep it. Something shifted in his expression. Why do you ask? Because I wonder if you regret it. His voice dropped lower. Choosing roots over recognition? Safety over possibility. Do you regret your choices? The question hung between them. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. But then Aunt Martha appeared to collect her, and Nathan stepped back into the careful courtesy of a host. "Thank you for performing tonight, Miss Mercer. I hope we'll see you again." "Thank you for inviting me, Your Honor." All proper, all correct, all utterly insufficient for the current running between them. In the carriage home, Martha remained uncharacteristically quiet until they were nearly back to their boarding house. "He likes you," she finally said. "He barely spoke to me all evening." "Exactly." Her aunt's smile was knowing. "He barely spoke to anyone. But he listened to you, watched you." "Aunt Martha, that boy has forgotten how to want something without calculating its cost first." Martha patted her hand. "You reminded him that some things have value beyond utility." "I played piano, that's all." "Keep telling yourself that, dear." Her aunt settled back against the cushions. "Though I suspect you're both terrible liars when it comes to yourselves." 3 days later, another invitation arrived. A garden party at the Callahan estate. Half of Virginia society would be there, and the note mentioned almost casually that Mrs. Callahan had requested Sarah bring her music should anyone wish for informal entertainment. "It's a test," Martha said, reading the invitation with shrewd eyes. "Eleanor is introducing you to society under her protection. If people see the Callahan matriarch approves of you, the gossip from the ball will fade. Or it will make things worse." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Make people think I'm social climbing." "You are social climbing, dear. We all are." Her aunt set down the invitation. "The question is whether you do it honestly or not. And if I'd rather decline, then decline." Martha's eyes held hers. "But ask yourself why. Fear of failure or fear of success?" Sarah looked at the invitation again. At the door it represented. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Whatever happens." The Callahan country estate made Sarah's breath catch. Not from intimidation, though it was grand enough, but from the wildflowers someone had planted along the drive. Poppies and cornflowers growing in cheerful chaos between the formal roses. Someone here loved growing things, not just owning them. "Not what you expected?" Martha asked. "I expected something more. Cold." "The house in town is cold. This is where they actually live." Her aunt adjusted her bonnet. "Eleanor moved here permanently after her husband died. Nathan splits his time, but I'm told he prefers the country when politics allow." The garden party was already underway when they arrived. Guests scattered across the south lawn in clusters of conversation. Servants circulated with lemonade and strawberries. A string quartet played beneath massive oak trees. It should have been perfect. It would have been, except Sarah spotted Caroline Thornton holding court near the fountain. Her blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight. Her laugh carried across the lawn like a bell designed to draw attention. And next to her, looking significantly less pleased about it, stood Nathan. "Deep breaths," Martha murmured. "You're invited. You belong here." Eleanor appeared before Sarah could respond. "Miss Mercer, how lovely. Come, let me introduce you to some friends." The next hour passed in a whirlwind. Eleanor was strategic in her introductions, presenting Sarah to matriarchs and debutantes, critics and composers, always with some comment about her talent that made it clear the invitation was genuine. Slowly, Sarah felt her shoulders relax. These people weren't judging her. They were curious, and curiosity she could handle. It wasn't until the afternoon heat drove everyone toward the shade that she finally encountered Caroline directly. "Miss Mercer." Caroline's voice was honey over steel. "How kind of Mrs. Callahan to take such an interest in new arrivals. She's always been so generous to those in need of patronage." Two girls flanking Caroline tittered. Sarah recognized them from the ball. Lavinia's set. Professional sycophants who laughed at cruelty and called it wit. "How kind of you to notice." Sarah kept her voice even. "Though I confess I received my invitation through interest in music, not need. Perhaps the distinction isn't clear to everyone." Caroline's smile sharpened. Oh, we all heard about your little performance. My mother said you played very enthusiastically. That's code for too loud, one of the girls whispered. I prefer to think of it as with feeling. Sarah didn't flinch. Though I understand some people find genuine emotion uncomfortable. Genuine. Carolyn's laugh was crystalline and cold. My dear, you're from Massachusetts. Half the county thinks you walked here behind a plow. Only half. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I must be more refined than I thought. You're certainly bold. Caroline's voice dropped. Dancing with a man you'd never met. Accepting invitations to his family home. Some might call that presumptuous. And some might call trying to force an engagement through rumor and social pressure desperate. The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. Sharp, clear, unforgivable. Silence fell like a hammer. Carolyn's face flushed red. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The girls beside her looked genuinely shocked. Too far. Sarah had gone too far. That was the kind of directness that got you exiled from polite society. But she couldn't regret it. Excuse me. She forced dignity into her voice. I believe I need some air. She turned and walked toward the rose garden before anyone could respond, half expecting outraged voices calling her back. But only silence followed heavy judging silence that felt worse than confrontation. She found a bench hidden between climbing roses and sat down before her knees could give out. What had she done? Aunt Martha had brought her south for opportunity. And Sarah had just insulted the daughter of one of the most influential families in Virginia. In front of witnesses. At a garden party hosted by the man both of them apparently wanted. This was worse than the dare at the ball. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. She jerked her head up. Nathan stood at the garden entrance, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. I think we both know which. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. I should probably leave before I make things worse. By telling the truth. He moved closer. Caroline has been spreading rumors about an engagement for months. Everyone knows it. No one says it. That doesn't make it appropriate. No. He sat down beside her close enough to be intimate, far enough to maintain propriety. But it makes it honest. And I'm finding I appreciate honesty more than I appreciate appropriateness. Sarah looked at him properly for the first time since he'd arrived. His cravat was slightly loosened. His hair ruffled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, and younger than his years. Are you engaged to her? She asked bluntly. Because if you are, I owe her an apology regardless of what I think. No. The word was firm. Final. And I've told Mrs. Thornton that repeatedly. She chooses not to believe me. Why don't you contradict the rumors publicly? Because her family controls votes, I need for legislation I care about. Because making an enemy of Judge Thornton would cost me political capital I can't afford to lose. His jaw tightened. Because sometimes my position demands I be strategic instead of honest. That sounds exhausting. It is. He turned to face her fully. Which is why your company has been unexpectedly refreshing, Miss Mercer. You say what you mean. You don't calculate every word for advantage. Oh, I calculate. She offered a rueful smile. I just do it poorly. That surprised a laugh out of him. A real one. Unguarded and warm. The sound transformed his face, completely erasing the careful control and revealing someone younger. Lighter. More like the man she suspected he'd been before duty buried him. You calculate terribly, he agreed. It's wonderful. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Roses and summer heat and the distant murmur of the party surrounding them like a fragile bubble. I should go back, Sarah finally said, before people start talking about us disappearing together. They're already talking. But he stood, offering his hand to help her up. His grip was warm, steady, and he held on for a moment longer than necessary. Let them, he said quietly. I should have stopped caring about their opinions months ago. He released her hand, but didn't step away. Stay. Play for everyone later. My mother's hoping you will. Let them see you're here by invitation, by merit, not by scheme. And if Caroline says something else, then I'll handle it. His voice held quiet certainty. I should have months ago. I've been too concerned with political consequences and not concerned enough with basic decency. Don't make enemies on my behalf. Sarah shook her head. I'm not worth that kind of trouble. That, Nathan said softly, is where you're wrong. He offered his arm, formal proper, and led her back to the party. They emerged from the rose garden to find Eleanor orchestrating a general movement toward the terrace. The piano had been brought outside for afternoon entertainment. Perfect timing. Eleanor's eyes were knowing. Miss Mercer, would you indulge us? It was both rescue and test. Sarah understood that clearly. Eleanor was giving her a chance to remind everyone why she'd been invited, and to do it under the Callahan family's explicit approval. I'd be honored, ma'am. The afternoon was hot, the piano slightly out of tune from being moved, and Sarah could feel Caroline's hostile stare from across the terrace. But when she placed her hands on the keys and began playing Vivaldi, this time bright and technical and impossible to perform without complete focus, the rest of it faded away. This was her gift, her weapon, her truth. She played 3 pieces without stopping, building from the Vivaldi to something more complex, a Mozart concerto that made her fingers fly and her heart race. By the time she finished, her hands ached and sweat dampened her temples. But the applause was thunderous. Even Caroline couldn't argue with skill that obvious. Magnificent! Eleanor embraced her warmly. Absolutely magnificent. The rest of the afternoon transformed. People approached to compliment her playing, ask about her training, request their favorite pieces. She was no longer the provincial newcomer who'd been dared to dance with a stranger. She was the musician the Callahan matriarch had championed. As sunset painted the sky, golden-pink guests began departing. Sarah found herself alone on the terrace when Nathan joined her. Thank you, he said simply, for playing, for staying, for being yourself despite excellent reasons to pretend otherwise. I'm too stubborn to pretend. Your mother's influence. My father's, actually. He always said honesty was cheaper than lies. Lies require maintenance. He sounds like a wise man. He was. Sarah's voice softened. He died 3 years ago. Fever took him and my mother both within a week of each other. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. My father died 2 years ago, he said finally. Heart gave out. They said it was sudden, but I think he'd been dying for years, just too stubborn to admit it. Were you close? No. The word held old pain. He wanted me to be something I wasn't. I wanted him to be something he couldn't be. We spent 20 years disappointing each other. I'm sorry. Don't be. He turned to look at her. It taught me something important. What's that? That regret is worse than failure. His eyes held hers. That dying respected but alone is still dying alone. That all the political victories in the world don't matter if you've got no one to share them with. Sarah's heart stuttered. That's a heavy lesson. I'm a slow learner. His mouth curved slightly. But I'm starting to figure it out. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. I'm hosting a dinner next week, Nathan said finally. Political contacts I need to maintain cordial relations with, including the Thorntons. That sounds dreadful. It will be. He paused. Which is why I'd like you there. Sarah stared at him. You want me at a political dinner with the family trying to force you into an engagement with their daughter? I want at least one honest person in the room. His expression was serious. And I want the Thorntons to understand that their rumors haven't created the inevitability they hoped for. Using me as a political statement seems unfair to you, he interrupted. Yes, I know. But I'm asking anyway. Because I'm selfish enough to want your company, even if my motives aren't entirely pure. She should say no. This was dangerous. Not just socially, but emotionally. She was starting to care about this complicated, careful man, who argued about farming and attended political dinners he hated, and looked at her like she was water after a drought. "Will there be music?" she asked instead. His mouth curved. "If you want there to be." "Then I'll come, but I'm bringing my aunt." "I wouldn't have it any other way." They stood together as the last carriages departed, not touching, not speaking, but sharing the same silence. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. And somewhere across the lawn, watching from her mother's carriage, Caroline Thornton's eyes narrowed with cold calculation. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The dinner at Nathan's townhouse was exactly as advertised, tedious, strategic, and suffocating with unspoken tension. Sarah sat between her aunt and an elderly congressman who'd fallen asleep twice during the soup course. Across the table, Judge Thornton held court pontificating about land taxes, while Nathan listened with the expression of a man counting the minutes until he could escape. Margaret Thornton smiled at everyone, while her eyes tracked Sarah's every movement. And Caroline, positioned directly across from Nathan, sparkled and flirted with the determination of someone fighting a war she refused to lose. "Don't you agree, Mr. Callahan?" Caroline asked for the third time. "A proper Virginia estate requires at least 12 guest chambers. Anything less is simply inadequate for entertaining." "I have 14 guest chambers." Nathan's voice was neutral. "Though I rarely fill them." "Oh, but you will?" Caroline's laugh was calculated. "Once you marry, the social obligations will increase dramatically." She glanced at Sarah with poisoned sweetness. "A wife in your position must be prepared for constant entertaining. It's quite demanding for those accustomed to simpler circumstances. Miss Mercer manages her aunt's household admirably." Eleanor's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. "She's proven quite capable of navigating society's demands." "Oh, of course." Caroline's smile didn't waver. "I simply meant that certain positions require certain refinements. Family connections. Understanding of political necessities. It requires competence." Nathan set down his fork. "Everything else is decoration." The table fell silent. Margaret Thornton's smile froze. Caroline looked like she'd been slapped. "Naturally." Judge Thornton cleared his throat. "Though one hopes for both competence and appropriate connections. One hopes for many things." Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Reality is often disappointing." The conversation limped forward from there, growing increasingly strained. By the time the ladies retired to the drawing room, Sarah's jaw ached from maintaining a neutral expression. "He's being deliberately obtuse." Margaret's voice was sharp the moment the door closed. "Everyone knows he needs our support in the legislature. This resistance is nothing but stubborn pride. Perhaps he simply doesn't wish to marry your daughter." Aunt Martha's sweetness could have cut glass. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "He will come around." Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "Once he realizes his alternatives are limited." "Limited how?" Sarah asked before she could stop herself. Margaret's gaze fixed on her like a snake focusing on prey. "Limited by reality, my dear. Mr. Callahan requires a wife of appropriate breeding and connections. Someone who understands the responsibilities of his position." Her lip curled. "Not some provincial musician who stumbled into his notice through a foolish dare." "Mother." Caroline touched her arm in warning, but Margaret shook her off. "Let's not pretend otherwise. You're charming enough, Miss Mercer, and your playing is technically proficient. But you're a novelty, an entertainment, nothing more." The words landed like physical blows. Sarah felt heat crawl up her neck. Anger and humiliation roared in her chest. "At least I'm honest about what I am." Her voice came out quiet, deadly. "I've never pretended to be anything else, or spread rumors to force someone's hand. How dare you? How dare I? Sarah stood abandoning all pretense of politeness. Your daughter has been telling half of Virginia she's engaged to a man who has never proposed. You've been using social pressure to manipulate him into a marriage he doesn't want. And you're calling me the problem. Sarah? Aunt Martha's voice held warning. But Sarah was past caring. Weeks of careful smiles and swallowed retorts boiled over. I may be provincial and awkward and completely unsuited for this world, but at least I'm not trying to trap someone into marriage through lies and social coercion. She met Margaret's furious gaze directly. So yes, I'm a novelty, but I'm an honest one. You're a fool. Margaret's voice was ice. You think he cares about you? You're a momentary distraction. Once he realizes what refusing us will cost him, he'll do what's necessary, and you'll be forgotten. Perhaps. Sarah's chin lifted. But at least I won't have forced him. She walked out before anyone could respond. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She made it to the library, before the tears came, tears of anger and shame, and the horrible suspicion that Margaret Thornton was right. She was a novelty, a distraction, a provincial girl who'd read more into a few kind words than was warranted. Miss Mercer. She spun around. Nathan stood in the doorway, his expression dark. I heard raised voices. My mother sent me to investigate. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Improper, scandalous, and she couldn't bring herself to care. What did Mrs. Thornton say? The truth, probably. Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. That I'm a foolish provincial who doesn't understand her place. That you're being polite, but I'm just temporary entertainment until you do what's politically necessary. And you believe her? I don't know. The words burst out ragged and honest. I don't know how any of this works. I don't know what any of this means. I thought... She stopped, unable to finish. You thought what? I thought maybe you actually liked my company. Her voice cracked. That the conversations were real. That the way you looked at me when I played meant something, but maybe I'm just naive enough to confuse courtesy with care. Sarah. He said her name like a prayer, a curse, a surrender. Look at me. She did reluctantly. His expression was stripped of all the careful control she'd grown accustomed to. I haven't been courteous, he said. I've been terrified. What? Because you're right. I do care. More than I should. Faster than makes sense. His voice dropped. And it's terrifying because caring makes me vulnerable in ways I can't afford. Then why? Because the alternative is worse. He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. Living the rest of my life calculating every interaction. Marrying someone I respect but don't love. Becoming the kind of man my father was powerful, respected, and fundamentally hollow. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You make me remember who I wanted to be before I became what I had to be. That's not fair. Her voice shook. Not to you or me. Nothing about this is fair. His eyes held hers. But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Let me navigate this mess. Let me prove that you're not a distraction. You're the first real thing that's happened to me in years. What about the Thorntons? The political consequences? I'll handle them. I should have months ago. His jaw set with determination. But I need to know if you want me to. If this is something you want to pursue, or if I'm the one being foolish. Sarah looked at their joined hands. At his face open and uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. Something shifted in her chest. I want it, she whispered. I want this. Even though it's terrifying and complicated and might end badly. Then we'll be terrified together. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow. And hope it ends well. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Then footsteps in the hallway forced them apart. But when they rejoined the others, something had changed. Nathan sat beside her instead of across from her. His attention focused on their conversation rather than Caroline's attempts to reclaim it. And when Margaret made another pointed comment about appropriate marriages, he met it with polite but unmistakable firmness. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Thornton, but I believe I'm capable of determining my own future." The evening ended early, the Thorntons departing with barely concealed fury. As Sarah and her aunt prepared to leave, Eleanor pulled her aside. "That took courage. Standing up to Margaret Thornton requires nerve." "I probably made everything worse." "Perhaps. Or perhaps you did what someone should have done months ago." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Either way, you were honest. That matters more than you know." The scandal broke 3 weeks later. Sarah was having tea with two ladies Eleanor had introduced her to when their housekeeper entered with a note. She opened it absently, expecting another invitation. The world tilted. The handwriting was elegant and vicious. "Miss Mercer, I feel it my duty to inform you of certain realities you seem unaware of. Mr. Callahan owes my husband significant political debts. His agricultural reform bill will fail without our family's support in the legislature. His mother's properties are entailed in ways that require Thornton votes to resolve. In short, he cannot afford to refuse our expectations. You are a pleasant distraction, but distractions end when reality reasserts itself. For your own dignity, I suggest you withdraw from this situation before you are publicly humiliated. With regards, Margaret Thornton." Sarah's hands shook as she set down the note. "Bad news?" one of the ladies asked. "No." The lie tasted like ash. "Just a change of plans." She made her excuses and left early. Back in her room, she read the note 3 more times. Each reading made her feel smaller, more foolish, more certain that Margaret was right. Nathan needed the Thornton votes. That was political reality. He might care about her. Might even believe what he'd said in the library. But when the choice came, her or his legislative agenda, her or his political future, what would he choose? And if he chose her, would he resent her forever for the cost? The knock came at midnight. Sarah almost didn't answer. She was exhausted, emotionally wrung out halfway through packing her trunk. But something made her open the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, disheveled and wild-eyed. "You're leaving?" Not a question. "In the morning." She kept the door partially closed. "It's better this way." "Better for who?" "Both of us." Her voice cracked, despite her best efforts. "You need to make the practical choice. I understand that." "What if I don't want to make the practical choice?" "Then you're a fool." The words came out harsh, desperate. "Those people need that legislation. You've worked for 2 years on it. I won't let you throw it away for what?" He stepped closer. "Say it." "For me." The admission tore out of her. "I'm not worth that kind of sacrifice. I'm nobody, just a girl who plays piano and doesn't understand your world and keeps making everything more complicated." "You're right about one thing." He pushed past her into the room. "Improper, urgent, past caring." "You don't understand." "Then explain it." "The legislation matters. But do you know what else matters? Living a life I can respect. Being someone my children won't be ashamed of." His hands gripped her shoulders. "Marrying Caroline would get me political victories. It would also make me exactly like my father, powerful, strategic, and fundamentally empty." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. I watched him choose duty over happiness every day of his life. He died respected and miserable, surrounded by people who valued his title but never knew him." His voice dropped. "I won't do that. I won't sacrifice the one genuine thing in my life because it's politically inconvenient." "What about the people who need the legislation?" "I'll find another way. Make different alliances. Take longer." His thumbs brushed her cheeks gentle, despite the intensity in his voice. "But I won't trade you for it. And I'm done pretending political necessity justifies emotional cowardice." The Thorntons said, "The Thorntons have been lying." Frustration bled through. "There is no engagement announcement planned. There never was. Margaret has been spreading rumors to force my hand, and I've been too concerned with avoiding confrontation to shut them down properly. But you've been in meetings all week. Finding other votes. Building a coalition that doesn't require selling myself to the Thorntons. He pulled her closer. It's taken weeks, but I have the numbers. The legislation will pass without them. Sarah stared at him, afraid to believe. You're certain? I had the final commitment this afternoon. That's why I came tonight. I needed to tell you before you left. His expression turned fierce. You are not a distraction. You are not a complication. You are the reason I remembered why I wanted to serve in the first place, to make things better, not just maintain power. That's still a lot of responsibility. Then carry it with me. His forehead pressed to hers. Stay. Let me court you properly. Let me prove this is real, not political strategy or temporary infatuation. And if the scandal never dies, if I'm always the provincial girl who trapped a wealthy man, then we'll face it together, and eventually we'll build something that matters more than their opinions. The words settled over her like sunlight after storm. Not a promise of easy, but a promise of real. I want to stay, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I want to stay. Then stay. He kissed her soft and sure and full of promise. And tomorrow we stop hiding. But scandal, as Margaret Thornton had promised, had other plans. Sarah was at a charity concert 2 weeks later when she overheard a conversation that shattered whatever fragile hope she'd been clinging to. Callahan's going to announce his engagement at the Harvest Ball. Margaret's voice carried clearly from behind a pillar. To my Caroline, he's finally accepted reality. What about the girl from Massachusetts? Oh, that was nothing. A momentary lapse. Margaret's laugh was crystalline and cold. He's too intelligent to throw away his political future for infatuation. Sarah's vision tunneled. She made it to the retiring room before the tears came, pressed her hands against the wall to stay upright. It was over. He'd made his choice. And it wasn't her. She'd known it would come eventually. Had told herself she was prepared. But preparation meant nothing against the actual pain of it. Miss Mercer. She looked up to find Eleanor standing in the doorway, her expression stricken. You heard. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. It's not true. Margaret is spreading lies again. Is it? Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. The Harvest Ball is in 2 weeks. Has he told you his plans? Eleanor's hesitation was answer enough. He's been in meetings with Thornton allies all week, the older woman admitted, trying to salvage the legislation. But he hasn't said anything about an engagement, because he's going to make the practical choice. Sarah's voice was flat. And I don't blame him. The legislation matters. People need it. I'm just me. You're the woman my son loves. Love isn't always enough. She straightened, forcing composure back into place. Thank you for everything, ma'am. You've been kinder to me than I deserved. Sarah, I should return home to Massachusetts. There's nothing left for me here. She left before Eleanor could argue, before she could be talked into staying, before hope could worm its way back in and break her all over again. The next morning she began packing in earnest. Are you certain? Aunt Martha asked, watching her fold gowns with mechanical precision. Yes. Sarah didn't look up. I tried. It didn't work. Time to go home. And Nathan? Will do what's necessary, as he should. She pressed down harder on a dress, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. I was a distraction. Now I'm not. It's simple. Nothing about this is simple. No. But pretending otherwise was destroying me. Her hands stilled. I can't watch him announce his engagement to Caroline. I can't stand in that ballroom and pretend it doesn't break something in me. Martha was quiet for a long moment. When do you want to leave? Tomorrow. Before the Harvest Ball. Before... Her voice cracked. Before I have to see any of it. Then we'll leave tomorrow. That night, Sarah wrote a letter she'd never send. She poured out everything she couldn't say to his face. How much she loved him. How proud she was of him for choosing duty. How she hoped he'd find happiness, even if it wasn't with her. She sealed it, addressed it to no one, tucked it in her trunk as a monument to feelings she'd never voice. And then she went to bed, knowing that when she woke, she'd be leaving Virginia forever. The knock came at midnight. Sarah's heart stuttered. She'd heard that knock before, knew who made it. Part of her wanted to pretend she was asleep, let him go, let this end cleanly. But her feet carried her to the door anyway. Nathan stood in the hallway, disheveled, wild-eyed, looking like he'd run the whole way from his estate. "You're leaving." His voice was raw. "Tomorrow morning. My mother told me." "There's nothing left to say." "There's everything left to say." He pushed past her into the room. "I heard what Margaret told those women at the concert. Every poisonous word." "Then you understand why I have to go." "I understand that you're believing lies over me." His hands caught her shoulders. "There is no engagement, Sarah. There never was. There never will be." "I heard her. She said you'd announce at the harvest ball." "She's lying. She's been lying for months." His grip tightened. "I've spent the last 2 weeks building a coalition that doesn't need a single Thornton vote. The legislation passes next week. Without them." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "I told you I'd find another way. Did you think I was lying? I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you'd choose duty. Everyone does." "I'm not everyone." He pulled her closer. "I'm the man who fell in love with a woman from Massachusetts who plays Beethoven like she's fighting for her life and tells powerful people exactly what she thinks of them. Nathan. I'm the man who would rather lose every political battle for the rest of my life than spend it with someone I don't love." His forehead pressed to hers. "I'm the man who's asking you, begging you not to leave. Not tomorrow. Not ever." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." His thumbs brushed her tears away. "But I'm more scared of watching you walk away." "What about the scandal? The rumors? Everything Margaret has said?" "Let her talk. Let them all talk." His voice hardened. "Tomorrow night at the harvest ball, I'm going to stand in front of everyone who matters and make it perfectly clear where I stand, and who I stand with. Nathan, you can't—" "I can. I will." He kissed her forehead. "The only question is whether you'll be there beside me." Sarah looked at him. At this complicated, stubborn, terrifying man who'd chosen her over everything his world told him to want. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll be there." His smile broke across his face like sunrise. "Then stop packing." He kissed her fierce and full of promise. "And get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." He left, the way he'd come. Improper, urgent, unforgettable. Sarah stood in the middle of her half-packed room, heart-pounding tears still wet on her cheeks. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just didn't know yet how much. Sarah dressed for the harvest ball with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She'd chosen pale gold instead of the elaborate gowns others would wear. Simple. Honest. If this was going to be her public stand, she'd do it as herself. "You're certain about this?" Aunt Martha adjusted Sarah's hair one final time. "No." Sarah met her own eyes in the mirror. "But I'm going anyway. That's my girl." The ballroom was already full when they arrived. The cream of Virginia society gathered for the season's final event. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her as they entered, felt the whispers surge like tide. She lifted her chin and walked forward. Eleanor found them immediately drawing Sarah into a warm embrace. "You came. Your son can be very persuasive. He learned from the best." Eleanor's smile was knowing. "He's in the card room, making final arrangements." "Arrangements for what?" "You'll see." The next hour was strange. People approached with a mix of curiosity and caution. Conversations strained, but not openly hostile. The worst of the gossips kept their distance, but a few genuine friends rallied visibly. It felt like standing on a precipice, waiting for someone to push. The push came from an unexpected direction. Miss Mercer. Caroline Thornton appeared in a gown of ice blue. How brave of you to attend. I was invited. Oh, certainly. But given recent rumors. Caroline's smile sharpened. I hope you're not here expecting some grand declaration. That would be embarrassing. The only thing I'm hoping for is an enjoyable evening. Sarah kept her voice level. Though I appreciate your concern. I'm simply trying to spare you humiliation. Caroline stepped closer, lowering her voice. Nathan has duties you don't understand. Responsibilities. He may have been momentarily diverted by your novelty. But nothing. Nathan's voice cut through the space between them. He'd appeared without either of them noticing. His expression could have been carved from granite. Mr. Callahan. Caroline's composure cracked. I know exactly what you were doing. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. And I'd like you to stop. I don't understand. Then let me be clear. His gaze swept the room. People had stopped pretending not to listen. Conversations died in expanding circles around them. I am not engaged to you. I have never been engaged to you. I have never suggested, implied, or indicated that I wish to be engaged to you. Caroline's face drained of color. But my mother said, Your mother has been spreading rumors without my knowledge or consent for the past 6 months. Nathan's voice carried across the now silent ballroom. Those rumors end tonight. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Nathan! Margaret Thornton pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. What is the meaning of this? The meaning is simple, Mrs. Thornton. Your daughter and I have no understanding. We never did. Any claims to the contrary were fabricated. How dare you? I dare because it's the truth. He stepped closer to Sarah. And because I'm tired of watching innocent people hurt by your lies. The crowd rippled with shock. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on them. Sarah could barely breathe. Miss Mercer. Nathan turned to face her, and his expression softened dramatically. Would you do me the honor of the next dance? The orchestra struck up a waltz without being asked, as if they'd been waiting for this moment all along. Sarah took his hand and let him lead her onto the floor. That was very public, she murmured as they began to move. That was overdue. His grip was firm, steady. I should have done it months ago. The Thorntons can do nothing. The legislation passed this afternoon, without a single vote from Judge Thornton. Something like triumph flickered in his eyes. Their leverage is gone. They'll still hate me. They already hated you. The difference is now they can't hurt you. He pulled her closer as they turned. And I won't let them try. The waltz ended too quickly, but before Sarah could step away, Nathan held onto her hand. Wait. His voice carried clearly. I have something else to say. The room went absolutely silent. Sarah's heart stopped. I've spent 2 years doing what was expected of me, Nathan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Making the practical choices, the strategic decisions, being the man my father wanted me to be instead of the man I actually am. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I'm done with that now. Nathan? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Miss Mercer came to Virginia 3 months ago knowing no one, owing nothing to anyone. His eyes never left her face. She walked into a ballroom full of strangers and approached a man no one dared speak to. Not for advantage, not for strategy, just because someone dared her to. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. That's the kind of courage most people in this room have never shown. Nathan's voice hardened. And instead of celebrating it, you mocked her, spread rumors about her, tried to drive her away. Shame flickered across several faces in the crowd. "Well, I'm telling you now, that ends tonight." He turned back to Sarah, and his expression transformed into something fierce and tender all at once. "Miss Mercer, I know this isn't proper. I know I should court you for months before saying anything like this, but I've wasted enough time on propriety." "What are you doing?" Sarah breathed. "Something I should have done the night I met you." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I'm asking you publicly, properly, in front of everyone who matters, if you would consider allowing me to court you. With intention. With everyone watching. With the full understanding that I'm choosing you, and nothing about that choice is accidental." Tears blurred Sarah's vision. 300 people held their breath. "Yes," she said simply. "I would be honored." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was transformative, joy replacing the careful control she'd grown accustomed to. He looked young, unburdened, free. "Thank you," he said. Then louder for everyone to hear. "Thank you." The applause started slowly, then built, then thundered. By the time it faded, the whispers had shifted tone. Not malicious now, speculative, calculating. If Nathan Callahan was serious, and that declaration left no doubt, then Sarah Mercer wasn't a scandal to be dismissed. She was the future Mrs. Callahan. Power followed intention in this world, and he'd just given her his. Margaret Thornton appeared as they left the dance floor. Her face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Nathan. "I don't think I will. My husband has influence." "Your husband has no power over me." Nathan's voice was cold. "Your votes are no longer necessary. Your threats are meaningless. And your daughter deserves better than being used as a political bargaining chip." Margaret's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "I suggest you find her a husband who actually wants her," Nathan continued, "rather than one you're trying to manipulate into taking her." He offered Sarah his arm. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe they're serving supper." They walked away, leaving Margaret Thornton speechless for the first time in her life. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of carefully worded congratulations and thinly veiled assessment. People who'd cut Sarah weeks ago now sought her attention. Allies repositioned themselves. The social landscape shifted with the speed of wind changing direction. "Is it always like this?" Sarah asked during a brief moment alone with Eleanor. "Like what?" "People pretending the last month never happened. Acting like they always supported me." "Always." Eleanor's expression was sympathetic. "They follow power, not principle. You're powerful now because my son made you so. Get used to the hypocrisy." "I don't think I can." "Then don't." The older woman squeezed her hand. "Be genuine. Be kind to the few who were kind to you first. Let the rest curry favor if they must, but don't trust it." "I'll try." "That's all any of us can do." As midnight approached, Nathan found her near the terrace doors. Ready to leave. More than ready. He handed her into the carriage with gentle care, then settled beside her with a sigh of relief. "That was terrifying," Sarah said. "That was necessary." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "But yes, also terrifying. What happens now? Now I court you properly. Spend time with your family. I'd like to meet your brothers. They'll interrogate you." "Good. They should." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I want them to know I value you enough to value them." And the legislation passed this afternoon. Every vote we needed. Pride flickered in his voice. "It wasn't easy, but it's done. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." He kissed her knuckles again. "You could have left. No one would have blamed you, but you stayed. I was terrified. So was I." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Still am occasionally, but less so with you beside me." They rode in comfortable silence the rest of the way, hands linked, futures stretching ahead like unwritten pages. It wasn't perfect. The scandal's echoes would follow them for months. Some people would always question her motives, his judgment. There would be more Margaret Thorntons, more challenges, more moments of doubt. But they would face them together. And that Sarah was learning mattered more than any amount of social approval. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Massachusetts. Sarah recognized her brother Daniel's handwriting before she even opened the envelope. Her heart clenched with sudden homesickness. "Dear Sarah," the letter read, "we received your letter about Mr. Callahan. Matthew threw it in the fire. Samuel wanted to come to Virginia immediately and punch the man in the face. I talked them both down, but only barely." She laughed despite herself. "However, we've discussed it and decided that we need to meet this gentleman who's been courting our sister. We're coming to Virginia, all 3 of us. Expect us within the fortnight. Daniel." Sarah's hands shook as she lowered the letter. Her brothers, coming here, to meet Nathan. "Bad news," Aunt Martha asked from across the breakfast table. "My brothers are coming." "All 3 of them." "All 3. Martha set down her teacup with a smile that was far too amused. "Well, this should be interesting." When Sarah told Nathan, his expression flickered through several emotions: surprise, concern, and finally something that looked almost like determination. "Good," he said. "I wanted to meet them anyway. They're going to be protective. They should be. I'm courting their sister. Daniel will be reasonable. He's the oldest. He thinks before he speaks." Sarah paused. "Matthew might actually try to punch you." "Will he succeed?" "He's built like an ox and has a temper to match." Nathan's mouth curved slightly. "I'll try not to give him reason." "And Samuel is the quiet one. He won't say much, but he'll watch everything. If he doesn't like you, he won't tell you. He'll just tell me." "What happens if he doesn't like me?" "Then I spend the next decade trying to change his mind." She met his eyes. "Samuel's opinion matters more to me than anyone's except my father's. And my father's gone." Something softened in Nathan's expression. "Then I'll make sure he likes me." "How?" "By being honest." He took her hands. "The same way I won you." The brothers arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah barely made it out the front door before Daniel swept her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "You're thin," he said by way of greeting. "Doesn't she feed you here?" "I'm not thin." "You're thin." Matthew grabbed her next, his embrace crushing the air from her lungs. "And you look tired. What's that Virginia man been doing to you?" "Nothing, Matthew. I can't breathe." "Good." He released her with a grin. "Missed you, little sister." Samuel hung back as he always did, but when Sarah reached him, his hug was the longest of all. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I am now." "Really all right, not just saying that for them." She pulled back to look at him, at the brother who'd always seen through her pretenses. "Really," she said. "I promise." Something in his expression eased. "Good. Then let's go meet this man who thinks he's good enough for you." Nathan was waiting in the drawing room when they entered. He'd dressed simply, no display of wealth, no elaborate formality. Just a man meeting the family of the woman he was courting. "Mr. Mercer." He extended his hand to Daniel. "Thank you for coming." Daniel's handshake was firm, assessing. "Thank you for having us." "Matthew." Nathan turned to the second brother. "Sarah tells me you're the one who keeps the farm running." Matthew's eyes narrowed. "She talks about the farm. She talks about all of you. Often." Nathan's gaze was steady. "She's proud of what you've built together." Something flickered across Matthew's face, surprise maybe, or the beginning of respect. "Samuel." Nathan faced the youngest brother last. "I've heard you're the one whose opinion matters most." Samuel didn't respond immediately. He studied Nathan with the same quiet intensity he'd used to study their father's fields, looking for signs of blight or drought. "You make her happy?" Samuel asked finally. I try to. She cried over you, a lot from what I can tell from her letters. Nathan didn't flinch. I know. I'm sorry for that. I made mistakes, was too slow to act when I should have been faster. Too concerned with other people's opinions when I should have been thinking about her. And now I'm trying to be better. Nathan's voice was quiet but certain. I can't promise I'll never hurt her again. But I can promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying not to. The room was silent. Then Samuel nodded. Once. Briefly. All right, he said. Let's see this farm of yours. The next 3 days were the strangest of Sarah's life. Her brother's rough, practical Massachusetts farmers wandered through Nathan's Virginia estate asking questions about crop rotation and soil composition and irrigation systems. Nathan answered every one, not with the polished responses of a man trying to impress, but with the genuine knowledge of someone who actually cared about the land. He knows his stuff, Daniel admitted on the second night after Nathan had spent 4 hours discussing wheat yields with Matthew. I'll give him that. He's not what I expected, Matthew added grudgingly. Figured he'd be all fancy words and soft hands. And Samuel? Sarah asked. What does Samuel think? Both brothers looked at their youngest sibling. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. He loves you, he said finally. Really loves you. Not just the idea of you. How can you tell? Because he watches you the way Pa watched Ma. Samuel's voice was soft. Like you're the most interesting thing in any room. Like he can't quite believe you're real. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. Does that mean you approve? It means I'm not going to punch him in the face. Samuel's mouth curved slightly. Which is more than I can say for most men who've looked at you. On the last night before her brothers left, Nathan asked to speak with Daniel alone. Sarah watched them walk toward the orchards, her heart hammering. He's asking permission, Aunt Martha said from beside her. You think so? I know so. Her aunt smiled. That's a man with something important to say. 20 minutes later, they returned. Daniel's expression was unreadable, but Nathan looked lighter, hopeful, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Well, Sarah demanded when Daniel reached her. Her brother was silent for a long moment. Then his face split into a grin. I told him yes. He pulled her into a hug. Pa would have liked him, Sarah. He really would have. The tears came, then tears of joy and grief and overwhelming relief all mixed together. Her brothers left the next morning with promises to return for the wedding. You take care of her, Matthew told Nathan, his handshake crushing. Or I'll come back here and... You'll what? Nathan raised an eyebrow. Punch me in the face. At least twice. Fair enough. Samuel's goodbye was quieter. He simply clasped Nathan's hand and held it for a moment, looking at him with those assessing eyes. Welcome to the family, he said finally. And somehow that meant more than all of Matthew's threats combined. After her brother's carriage disappeared down the drive, Nathan found her standing alone in the garden. Your brothers are terrifying, he said conversationally. They liked you. Did they? Samuel said, welcome to the family. That's practically a declaration of eternal friendship from him. Nathan laughed a real laugh, unguarded and warm. Then I consider myself fortunate. You should. Sarah turned to face him. So, what exactly did you ask Daniel? I think you know. I'd like to hear it from you. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. I asked for his blessing, to court you formally with the intention of marriage. I told him I loved you, that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you, that I'd spend every day trying to deserve you. And he said yes. He said yes. Nathan's eyes held hers. So now I'm asking you, Sarah Catherine Mercer, will you marry me? She'd known this was coming, had been waiting for it, hoping for it, but hearing the words still stole her breath. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her, then not gently, not carefully, but with all the passion they'd been holding back for months. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I love you," Nathan said against her lips. "I've loved you since you walked across that ballroom floor and asked a stranger to dance." "I love you too." Tears streamed down her face. "I've loved you since you said yes." They stood there in the garden holding each other as the summer sun set over the Virginia hills. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be challenges ahead: wedding preparations, social integration, learning to navigate Nathan's world while staying true to herself. Margaret Thornton would never forgive them. Some people would always whisper about the provincial girl who'd captured Virginia's most eligible bachelor. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was this moment. This man. This choice they'd both made to build something real instead of something convenient. "When do you want to get married?" Nathan asked finally. "Soon," Sarah said, "before I change my mind." He laughed. "You won't change your mind." "How do you know?" "Because you're too stubborn to admit you were wrong." He kissed her forehead. "It's one of the things I love most about you." "Careful. That stubbornness might come back to haunt you." "I'm counting on it." His arms tightened around her. "I'm counting on spending 50 years arguing with you about everything and nothing." "Only 50? 60 then, 70, however many we get." Sarah smiled against his chest. "I suppose that's acceptable." "Just acceptable?" "Well..." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I might be convinced to negotiate." "What would that take?" "Kiss me again and we'll see." He did. And in that moment, everything else faded away. The whispers, the scandals, the judgment. There was only them. Only this. Only the future they were building together. One kiss at a time. The wedding preparations consumed the next 3 months like wildfire. Sarah had imagined something simple. A quiet ceremony, close family, perhaps a small gathering afterward. Nathan had other ideas. "You're marrying into Virginia society," Eleanor said gently, when Sarah protested the guest list that had somehow grown to 400 names. "Like it or not, this wedding is a statement." "A statement of what?" "That you belong here, that you're not some provincial girl who tricked her way into a good marriage." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Let them see the truth. Let them see that my son chose wisely." So Sarah surrendered. To the fittings, the flowers, the endless debates about seating arrangements and menu selections and music choices. But she drew one line she refused to cross. "I'm playing at my own wedding," she told Nathan flatly. "I don't care what anyone thinks." "I wouldn't have it any other way." His smile was warm. "Though you might have to convince my mother." "Your mother suggested it." "Did she?" "She said, and I quote, 'Any fool can hire musicians. It takes something special to be one.'" Nathan laughed. "I'm starting to think she likes you more than she likes me." "She definitely likes me more than she likes you." "Well," he pulled her close, "at least we agree on something." The week before the wedding, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was practicing in the music room Mozart this time. Something light to calm her nerves when the door opened. Caroline Thornton stood in the doorway. Sarah's hands froze on the keys. Every muscle in her body tensed. "Miss Thornton." She kept her voice neutral. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know." Caroline stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Your housekeeper tried to turn me away. I told her I'd wait on the front steps all day if I had to." "What do you want?" "To apologize." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah stared at her. This was the woman who'd mocked her at parties, spread rumors about her, tried to steal the man she loved. "I don't understand." "I know you don't." Caroline's voice was tired, different somehow, the sharp edges worn away. "I've been horrible to you, Miss Mercer, cruel in ways I'm ashamed to remember." "Yes, you have." "I know." Caroline sat down without being invited, another breach of propriety that seemed to matter less now. My mother made me believe that Nathan was my future, that marrying him was the only way to secure our family's position. I was raised to see him as a prize to be won, not a person to be known. Sarah said nothing. But watching you together, watching the way he looks at you. Caroline's voice cracked. I realized something. He never looked at me that way. Not once. Not even when my mother was at her most persuasive. That's not my fault. No, it's not. Caroline met her eyes directly. It's mine, for believing I could force something that was never real. Silence stretched between them. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked finally. Because I'm leaving Virginia. My mother is not taking things well. The scandal of your engagement has made our social position difficult. Caroline's smile was bitter. Ironic, isn't it? We spent months trying to create a scandal around you. Now we're the ones people whisper about. I'm sorry. Don't be. Caroline stood. I'm going to my aunt's in Philadelphia, starting over, learning to be someone other than Margaret Thornton's daughter. She paused at the door. I hope you'll be happy, Miss Mercer. Truly happy. The kind of happy I was too foolish to want for myself. Then she was gone. Sarah sat alone in the music room for a long time after that, thinking about choices, about the paths that led people to kindness or cruelty, about the courage it took to change. When Nathan found her an hour later, she told him everything. Caroline apologized, he repeated slowly. She did. And she seemed genuine. She seemed broken, like someone who finally saw the truth and didn't know what to do with it. Nathan was quiet for a moment. My mother always said Margaret destroyed that girl. His voice was soft. Molded her into a weapon instead of a person. I used to think Caroline enjoyed being cruel. Now I wonder if she ever knew how to be anything else. She's going to Philadelphia, starting over. Good. He took Sarah's hand. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even the people who hurt us. Especially them. He kissed her forehead. Otherwise, what's the point of forgiveness? The morning of the wedding dawned clear and golden. Sarah woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She lay in bed watching the light creep across the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A dare at a ball, a dance with a stranger, months of uncertainty and heartbreak and joy, and now this, a new beginning. You're awake. Aunt Martha appeared in the doorway, already dressed. Good. We have a lot to do. The next few hours blurred together. Hair, dress, flowers. An endless parade of people with urgent questions and minor crises. Through it all, Sarah felt strangely calm. You're not nervous? Martha asked as she helped fasten the last button on Sarah's gown. I was nervous yesterday, and the day before. Sarah looked at her reflection, pale gold silk, simple and elegant, just like she'd wanted. Today, I'm ready. Your mother would be proud of you. Sarah's eyes stung. You think so? I know so. Martha's voice was rough. She always said you'd find someone who saw the real you. Someone who loved the piano-playing, farm-working, stubborn as a mule girl you actually are. I miss her. I know, child. I miss her too. Martha squeezed her shoulders. But she's here, right here. She touched Sarah's heart. She'll always be here. A knock interrupted them. It's time. Daniel's voice called through the door. The carriage is waiting. Sarah took one last look at her reflection. Then she walked out to meet her future. The church was full. 400 people crowded into pews that should have held 300. Standing room only in the back. Faces she recognized and faces she didn't all turned toward her as she entered. But Sarah only saw one. Nathan stood at the altar watching her approach with an expression that made her heart stop. Wonder, joy, love so fierce it seemed to burn. Daniel walked her down the aisle. His arm was steady under her hand. His presence a reminder of everything she carried with her family history, the Massachusetts girl who'd somehow found her place in Virginia. "Who gives this woman?" the minister asked. "Her family does." Daniel's voice was clear and strong. "With all our love and all our blessing." He kissed her cheek, then stepped back, and then it was just her and Nathan. "You came," he whispered. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I was terrified you'd change your mind." "Never." She smiled through sudden tears. "You're stuck with me now." "Promise." "Promise." The ceremony was brief, traditional. The words spoken by 1,000 couples before them, to have and to hold for better or worse, until death do us part. But when Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembled. "I love you," he said softly. "More than I knew I could love anything." "I love you too." Her voice broke. "More than music. More than Massachusetts. More than anything." "Then let's begin." They turned to face the congregation as the minister pronounced them man and wife, and Sarah Catherine Mercer became Sarah Catherine Callahan. The reception was everything she'd dreaded and everything she'd hoped. People lined up to congratulate them, some genuine, some merely polite, some clearly still adjusting to the reality that the provincial girl had won. Sarah smiled until her face ached and accepted good wishes she wasn't entirely sure were sincere. But there were moments of real joy too. Her brothers awkward in their borrowed suits, drinking too much punch, and telling embarrassing stories about her childhood. Aunt Martha finally allowing herself to cry after months of holding Sarah together. Eleanor embracing her as a daughter instead of a guest. And Nathan. Always Nathan. His hand finding hers under the table. His smile catching her eye across crowded rooms. His presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this anymore. "Dance with me," he said as the evening wound down and the guests began to drift away. "We've danced 4 times already." "I want a 5th. He pulled her onto the floor. "I want 1,000. "That might take a while." "We have time." He spun her gently. "We have the rest of our lives." The music swelled around them, a waltz she'd chosen herself, something tender and hopeful, and full of promise. "Do you remember the first time we danced?" Nathan asked. "How could I forget I was terrified?" "So was I." "You didn't seem terrified." "I was very good at hiding it." His arms tightened around her. "But then you said something about charity being in short supply, and I thought this one is different. I thought you were going to have me thrown out. I thought about kissing you right there in the middle of the ballroom." Sarah laughed. "That would have caused quite a scandal." "Worth it." He dipped her, making her gasp. "Every scandal we've had has been worth it." The music ended. The last guests departed. The house fell quiet. And finally, they were alone. "Nervous?" Nathan asked as they climbed the stairs together. "A little." "Me too." She looked at him in surprise. This is..." He paused, searching for words. "This is the beginning of everything. Our real life together. No more courting, no more waiting, no more wondering if it's going to fall apart." "It's not going to fall apart." "I know." He stopped at the top of the stairs, turning to face her. "But I've spent so long being afraid of wanting things, of reaching for happiness and having it taken away." "Nathan." "Let me finish." His hands cupped her face. "Tonight I'm choosing to stop being afraid. I'm choosing to believe that this is real. That you're real. That we're going to have 50 years together, 60, 70, and every single one of them is going to be better than the last." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's a big promise." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "But I'm good at keeping promises." "Are you? Ask me in 50 years. You can tell me if I was right." She smiled through her tears. "I'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the music room at Thornfield, playing Beethoven, while winter snow fell outside. The room was warm, the instrument perfectly tuned, and for the first time since arriving in Virginia, she felt completely at peace. The door opened quietly. She didn't stop playing Beethoven's Sonata No. 14, technically challenging and emotionally complex, but she smiled. Nathan sat down beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Your brother writes," he said when she finished the piece. "Which one?" "Daniel. He says the spring planting went well. The wheat yields are up 30% from last year. He's using the rotation system. The one you taught him. He says to tell you it's working even better than you predicted." Pride warmed her chest. "I told him it would." "You told everyone it would. Most of them just didn't listen. Virginia farmers are stubborn." "Virginia everything is stubborn." He kissed her temple, especially the ones from Massachusetts. Sarah laughed and leaned into him. "I have news too," she said quietly. "What kind of news?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. For a moment he didn't understand. Then his eyes widened. "Sarah, I saw the doctor yesterday." Her voice trembled. "He confirmed it. We're going to have a baby." The sound Nathan made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "A baby." He pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy." He pulled back to look at her, tears streaming down his face. I don't have words. There aren't words for this. I was scared to tell you." She wiped at her own tears. "I thought I don't know what I thought. That it might be too soon. That you might not be ready." "Sarah." His hands cupped her face. "I've been ready for this since the moment I met you. I just didn't know it yet." "Really? Really?" He kissed her soft, reverent, full of wonder. "You've given me everything. A home, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. You were always good. I was surviving. You taught me how to live." She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, the love, the gratitude, the overwhelming joy of this moment. "I want to name her after my mother," she said when they finally broke apart. "If it's a girl." "Catherine. Catherine Eleanor." She smiled. "If that's all right with your mother." "She'll cry for a week." Nathan laughed. "She'll love it." "And if it's a boy?" "James." His voice softened. "After my father. Not because he was a good man, but because I want to be the father he never was." "You will be." Sarah touched his face. "You already are." They sat together on that piano bench as the snow continued falling, not speaking, not needing to speak, just breathing the same air and dreaming the same dreams. "Are you scared?" Nathan asked finally. "Terrified," Sarah smiled. "But the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something wonderful is happening." "I didn't know there was a good kind." "There is. I learned it from you." "From me." "You taught me that fear isn't always a warning." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Sometimes it's just your heart telling you that something matters, that you have something worth protecting." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "My father was afraid of everything," he said finally. "Afraid of failure. Afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid of wanting things he might not get." "You're not your father." "No, I'm not." His grip tightened on her hand. "Because I have you, and you never let me hide from the things that scared me." "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth." He kissed her knuckles. "You walked into that ballroom and asked a stranger to dance. You stood up to Margaret Thornton when everyone else was too afraid to speak. You stayed when leaving would have been easier." "I stayed because I loved you." "I know." His eyes held hers. "And that's the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." Spring came early that year. Sarah watched the gardens bloom from her chair by the window, one hand resting on her growing belly. The baby had started kicking last week, little flutters at first, then stronger movements that made Nathan laugh with delight every time he felt them. "She's going to be a fighter," he said, pressing his palm against the spot where a tiny foot had just pushed. "Or he." "She," Nathan insisted. "I'm sure of it. She's going to be exactly like her mother, stubborn, brilliant, and completely unimpressed by everything I say." "You sound terrified." "I am." He grinned. "In the best way." Eleanor visited every day now, bringing baby clothes she'd been secretly sewing for months, and unsolicited advice about everything from feeding schedules to sleeping arrangements. "Let her help," Sarah told Nathan when he protested that his mother was overwhelming her. "She's excited, and honestly, I need all the help I can get." "You'll be a wonderful mother." "How do you know?" "Because you're wonderful at everything else." He kissed her forehead. "And because I'll be right here beside you, learning together." "That's a lot of faith." "Faith is all we ever had." His eyes were soft. "From the very beginning. Faith that this could work. Faith that we could build something real." "And did we?" "Look around." He gestured at the room, at the baby clothes piled on chairs, the letters from her brothers scattered across the desk, the piano waiting in the corner. "What do you see?" Sarah looked, and for the first time she saw it clearly. A home. Not just walls and furniture, but a life they'd built together, filled with love and laughter and the promise of more to come. "I see everything," she whispered. "Everything I ever wanted." "Good." Nathan pulled her close. "Because that's exactly what I see too." The baby came on a summer evening, just as the sun was setting over the Virginia hills. 12 hours of labor. 12 hours of fear and pain, and Nathan pacing outside the door like a man facing execution. But when the midwife finally placed the tiny, squalling bundle in Sarah's arms, all of it faded away. "A daughter," Eleanor announced, tears streaming down her face. "A perfect, beautiful daughter." Nathan burst through the door before anyone could stop him. He stopped dead at the sight of them. Sarah exhausted but radiant, their daughter cradled against her chest. "Sarah." "Come meet her." Sarah's voice was rough from screaming, but her smile was the brightest thing in the room. "Come meet your daughter." He crossed to the bed in 3 strides, sank down beside her, looked at the tiny face peering up at him with eyes that were already brown, already wise. "Catherine Eleanor Callahan," Sarah said softly. "We did it." Nathan's hand trembled as he touched his daughter's cheek. "She's perfect." His voice cracked. "She's absolutely perfect. She has your eyes. She has your chin." He laughed through tears. "Stubborn already, I can tell." "Good." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "She'll need it. This world isn't kind to women who know their own minds." "Then we'll raise her to be kind anyway." Nathan kissed the top of Sarah's head. "Kind and strong and brave, just like her mother. And her father." "I'm working on it." Sarah smiled, exhaustion finally pulling her under. "You're already there," she murmured. "You've been there since the moment you said yes." The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Nathan holding their daughter, whispering promises she couldn't quite hear but knew by heart anyway. To love, to protect, to be there. Always. 5 years later, on a summer evening much like the one when Catherine was born, Sarah sat on the porch of Thornfield and watched her daughter chase fireflies across the lawn. Nathan sat beside her, their second child, a son they'd named James, sleeping in his arms. "Do you ever think about that night?" Nathan asked quietly. "The ball where we met." "Sometimes." Sarah smiled. "I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd ruined everything. You were terrified. You were the scariest man in the room. I was lonely." His voice was soft. "I was lonely and angry and convinced that no one would ever see past the Callahan name to the person underneath." And then some foolish girl from Massachusetts asked you to dance. And my whole life changed." He turned to look at her, really look the way he had that first night. "I never thanked those Thornton girls, you know." "For what?" "For daring you to approach me. For being cruel enough to send you into the lion's den." He reached for her hand. "Without that dare, I'd never have met you. I'd have married some suitable Virginia wife and spent the rest of my life wondering why I felt so empty. You'd have survived. Surviving isn't living." He squeezed her hand. "You taught me that." Catherine shrieked with delight as she caught a firefly. Her laughter echoed across the evening air, bright, joyful, untouched by any of the fears that had haunted her parents. "What do you think she'll be?" Sarah asked. "When she grows up, anything she wants." Nathan's voice held quiet certainty. "A musician like her mother, a farmer like her uncles, a politician like her father, if she has the stomach for it." "God forbid." "Agreed." He laughed. "But whatever she chooses, she'll do it on her own terms, because that's what we've taught her. To be stubborn, to be brave." He turned to face her fully, to walk into rooms full of strangers and ask them to dance, to stand up for what she believes in even when it's hard, to love fiercely and forgive freely, and never ever apologize for being exactly who she is. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "You really think we've taught her all that?" "I think we're teaching her every day." Nathan lifted their joined hands to his lips. "Every time we choose each other. Every time we fight and make up and keep going anyway. Every time we show her that love isn't a fairy tale. It's a choice you make over and over, even when it's difficult." "When did you become so wise?" "When I fell in love with a woman from Massachusetts who plays piano like she's fighting for her life." Sarah laughed, wiping her eyes. "I love you, Nathan Callahan." "I love you too, Sarah Callahan." He kissed her hand. "I have since the moment you asked me to dance, and I will until the day I die." "Promise." "Promise." Catherine came running up the porch steps, fireflies forgotten, demanding to be held, and told stories, and promised adventures. Nathan scooped her up with one arm, while Sarah took baby James with the other. And there on that summer evening, surrounded by the family they'd built together, Sarah finally understood something she'd been chasing her whole life. Home wasn't a place. It wasn't Massachusetts or Virginia or any point on a map. Home was this: the people you loved, the choices you made, the courage to walk into the unknown and trust that you wouldn't be alone. She'd spent so long trying to belong, to fit into a world that kept telling her she wasn't enough. But Nathan had never asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. Not acceptance into society, not wealth or status or a fancy name. Just the simple, extraordinary truth that she was enough. Had always been enough. Would always be enough. For him. For their children. For the life they were building together. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked softly. Sarah looked at him, at this man who had terrified her and challenged her and loved her with a fierceness she still couldn't quite believe. "I'm thinking about dares," she said, "and how sometimes the scariest ones lead to the best things. Like asking a stranger to dance. Like saying yes when you should have said no." He smiled, that rare, unguarded smile she'd fallen in love with. "I've never regretted saying yes," he said. "Not for one moment." "Neither have I." She leaned into him, their children between them, the summer stars beginning to appear overhead. And in that moment, Sarah Catherine Callahan knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. Not because she'd changed herself to fit someone else's expectations, but because she'd been brave enough to stay exactly who she was and found someone who loved her for it. That was the truth she'd carry with her for the rest of her days. That love, real love, didn't ask you to be smaller. It asked you to be brave. And she had been. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope this story reminded you that choosing authentically, even when it's terrifying, is always worth it. Your presence here makes these stories possible, and I'm grateful for every moment you've spent listening. If you enjoyed Sarah and Nathan's journey, please like this video and leave a comment about your favorite moment. It helps other listeners find these stories. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one, because I have more tales of courage and love waiting for you. Thank you for being here. You're the reason I tell these stories.